Can you hear me? Oh, great. Wonderful. Hello, lovely people. Welcome to the closing session at Red Hat Agile Day. I am Jen Krieger, and I am here to talk to you about the 4+ long years of what it was like in our P&T department, our Products and Technologies department here at Red Hat, and how we modernized our Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 product, both from a design, a process, and a culture perspective. Probably need this, right? And I want to make a note. So you're going to see this guy's name, Brendan Conaboy, all over my slides. Brendan actually was my co-conspirator for 4 years. In fact, this is the both of us in this very grainy picture of us presenting this actual slide deck at Summit, at Red Hat Summit this year. Now, the one thing I will mention is that Brendan is a technologist, so the slides at Summit were very low level. They were very technically detailed. That is not my jam, so I am not going to go into the low-level technical detail. And for all of my RHEL employees who are listening to me speak right now, if I say something slightly wrong, I invite you to email me, CC Memo List, Jim Whitehurst, and Paul Cormier, who are our CIO, or excuse me, the CEO, and our Chief of P&T, and make sure that they know that I said something wrong. That would be great. In fact, if I am not getting emails now, I would be very surprised. So RHEL, like every other story out there, is a story of 3 parts. This story is a very long one, and it started very slowly. We definitely had a wonderful situation that we could pretty much do whatever we wanted to, but we really weren't sure exactly what it was that what did we want to be when we grew up? We didn't know. And the problem with not knowing is that everything we do is very visible. As many of you know, we work upstream open source, and that means all of our code is public, which means everybody and their mother can see everything that we're doing. Now, for those of you who don't work open source, let me tell you a little bit about what it's like to work open source with Linux. The first one being that Linux distributions, how many of you are aware of how old Linux distributions are? Anybody? Great, some hands going up in the room. Linux was an idea that started in 1991. So they're over a quarter of a century year old. So think about your projects today or the products that you're working on, and think about 25 years versus maybe the 6, 9 month, a year-old product that you have, and just think about the complexity there. So there's a lot of things that happen in Linux that straight up aren't complementary of a fast-moving, agile-like environment. Additionally, RHEL itself is huge. Millions upon millions of lines of code go into the operating system as it is. And the RHEL distribution for our 8, which went out in May, was comprised of over 3,000 upstream projects. So what that means is there are 3,000 separate places that we contribute upstream in order to bring code down, to put it all together, and to deliver the operating system. And those 3,000 packages, or excuse me, projects result in over 12,000 packages that we then deploy to our customers. So that's a lot of code. It's huge. And to be even further more complicated, we are not owners of the code. We are stewards of the code, which means that we do not make decisions unilaterally. We can't. We work with a lot of other companies that want certain things a certain way. And so all we can do is participate, influence, drive connection via just being there and being good maintainers of the code. So we cannot force decisions. We can only hope to help communities go in the direction that we need them to. And so you might imagine already I am setting a stage in which Agile just frankly is not possible here, right? Anybody else agree with me? Let me tell you it is, because I'm going to show you that it is. So RHEL 2.1 was our first launch of Red Hat Enterprise Linux in March of 2002. That was our first release. We released it immediately a year and 6 months later for RHEL 3. RHEL 4 was a year and 3 months after that, then 2 years and 1 month, then 3 years and 8 months, and then 3 years and 7 months, and 4 years and 11 months. So what do y'all notice about that? That's kind of hard. especially right next to John P. Cotter saying all industries are going to speed up. And FYI, if you add that to the other quote, companies that can't speed up are going to get killed, they're going to die. And then you look at those dates and you say, oh, whoops, we might have done something different. We might have not paid attention to what Cotter was saying. And it wasn't because we flat out didn't think that going faster was the right thing. It was just that the distribution got larger and larger, and as interest grew and as it became more popular and more used in all infrastructure and banking and telcos, and your airlines use it, and internet runs on Linux, and there's all sorts of different ways that it's used now today, it just became massive. And in between RHEL 7 and RHEL 8, we did something vastly different than we have ever done before. We decided to experiment with Agile. And as you all heard this morning, Doug said, from the wise words of a CEO, it looks like you're not actually going any faster. In fact, you're slowing down. And so here is the proof. For Doug, we did slow down. In fact, we slowed down significantly. So here's what we started with. At the end of RHEL 7, we all sat in a room and said, we've got increasingly longer periods of time between each distribution. They're getting larger. It's not like we're getting incremental headcount that's actually helping us grow with the size of the distribution. We have to continue to do more with less. Does that sound familiar too? It's always more with less. And one of the biggest problems was we had a huge problem technically, which was that when we look at the operating system, it is comprised of two major parts: the actual operating system itself, which is the kernel, and the application layer, which is, as you might imagine, all the applications that sit on top of an operating system. And the problem is that they have two business objectives that are in conflict with one another. Companies want the kernel to move slow. They want it to be compatible. They want it to work. Applications want to update faster. We want Python, the new version of Python, faster, and it has to be compatible with the underlying operating system. And so these tech objectives are at conflict with each other. One wants to move slow and the other one wants to move very fast. And frankly, they were coupled, and we couldn't actually do it. We had no technical way of doing it. So our first technical objective for launching RHEL 8 was to separate the the OS from the applications. We also had two process nightmares. The first one being we ran on outmoded tools. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But basically that meant we were trying to essentially run a billion-dollar business out of Bugzilla, which for those of you who know what Bugzilla is, it's a bug tracker. Frankly, just a bug tracker. So no planning, no nothing, none of that stuff. And the other process nightmare we had was, regardless of how fast we perceived we wanted to go, the frank and honest truth was our waterfall schedule to get from the point at which we decided what to do and the point at which we actually launched code, we could get it no shorter than 24 months, no shorter. And it was just because of security, of our quality dedication to our customers. We just needed to do things a certain way. And so that was also a huge problem. We had 4 years to do it. We knew going into it, it was going to take a really long time, and that 4 years was already ticking. And every day I would wake up and say, oh God, we just lost a day, and we haven't made any progress. And so 4 years sounds like a long period of time, but I will tell you it's categorically not, especially when you're talking about 1,500 people. And that is really the size of RHEL. Now, I put a little squiggly mark in front of that because, quite frankly, depending on who you ask and what they're feeling for the day, they might tell you 1,100, they might tell you 1,500, they might tell you 1,800, or they may say way too damn many people, right? So yeah, so 1,500 people is a really large number of people to change. And so this is really what we had. We had open source stewards, folks who were shepherding code, not owning code. And for the most part, they worked in individual silos, teams of one. Lots of teams of one in the room. Anybody have a team of one? I have lots of teams of one. I have 1,500 teams of one. I needed development teams. I needed them to reimagine the way that they work together. I needed developers to work with quality engineers, to work with our documentation experts, to work with our support team, together as one unit. That's what I needed. I had a very mature Linux distribution that was heavily coupled between OS and app, and I had to change those fundamentals. We had to be able to deliver faster. How can we do it if it's technically not possible? And frankly, our customers don't want us to. And we had lots of legacy process. It was crippling, actually, our process. And we had to reinvent everything. And so what do you think we did? I already told you. This calls for Agile. Dun, dun, dun. And frankly, we did the usual thing, which was Scrum, because that's basically what 40% of companies out there do today. They say, you've got a problem in process, let's try Scrum, right? Well, not everything went well. And there's lots of reasons why that is actually true, but it was more because we actually didn't accept failure fast enough. We could have accepted failure fast enough if folks might have listened to me more in the early days, but we'll leave that over there for now. But we did have some serious successes. We actually had Scrum teams who got together. There were a few of them in the very early days, and instead of maintaining as code stewards, they actually were able to work separately and innovatively try to create something new for RHEL that would help us decouple that technology. And that was a really great experience for many of the people inside of our division. We also had cross-functional teamwork. And so instead of those single silos of people, we introduced an idea of what we call subsystem teams. And for those of you who are safe people in the room, it's just a release train. That's all it is. We just call them subsystem teams because it wasn't a term in Agile, and we don't really use that term too much. So just so you know. And those teams are comprised of quality engineers, of documentation folks, of engineers, and more importantly, product owners as well. And, excuse me, we also, via those Scrum teams, had answers for our distribution problems. We actually found those technical answers via those Scrum teams working innovatively in short feedback loops together. And that distribution experimentation actually produced some of the fastest supercomputers in the world that now run for us and do wonderful things for us as an industry. But we should have seen some of the not so good things coming. These are obvious things that somebody who has been in Agile since it was born should have been able to see coming. And this is one of them. So in a traditional Scrum environment, and it seems so weird to say the word traditional with the word Scrum, but in a traditional Scrum environment, you would want balanced functions. In fact, I think the industry standard is 1 product manager to 7 engineers is typically the type of balance that you're looking for. And I see no one agreeing with me in the room, which means no one has this. But that is what the industry states is the average, right? This is really what it looked like in RHEL. Because we are an engineering organization, and we like to say we're engineering driven, whatever that means, right? Engineering makes decisions and we move forward them, and we bring the business folks along with us, kicking and screaming. Well, we didn't really have so many of them, and so when we started to actually put these Scrum teams together, we capped out on all of the other functions outside of engineers very quickly. In fact, we were so outbalanced that we jettisoned those people into space. And they're still up there trying to call into Blue Jeans on a day-to-day basis. So just so you know, we sometimes send them food. So this is really what we learned. Obviously, we had to try to scale, right? And so our classic Scrum teams, frankly, topped out at 50 people. And so 1,500 people, we could scale no more than 50 people on Scrum teams. That's a really hard reality to digest, because we weren't going to suddenly find the funding we needed to actually hire all the people to then put the rest of those 1,500 people on, or 1,450 people on Scrum teams. It wasn't going to happen. Our technology owners operated solely in silos. What I mean by that is a product manager would make a decision, and then an engineer would make a decision, and then a docs person would make a decision, and then the quality engineer would make a decision, and no one was making decisions together. And typically what happened is an engineer would make a unilateral decision and then say, everybody's got to deal with my decision. And that put burden on those roles that were, as you saw, in space somewhere, trying to connect and trying to drive decisions. And then teams mostly only talked at milestones. So if you think about that, and you think about the type of environment and the culture it might have built to have an engineer say, well, we're going to do this whether you want to or not. Here's the code. And then I only talk to you like once every 6 months when a waterfall milestone is coming up, you might imagine those conversations can become quite heated. And for those of you who are familiar with Red Hat culture, you will know that our way of talking to one another is very direct. And it's really okay that we share information very directly, but that can also make people's heart rates go out of control and make some of those conversations truly conflict-driven. And so it was, in the very early days, very difficult to get people to stop yelling at each other. What we were worried about was simply, how are we going to scale 1,500 people, mostly remote, on these teams? How are we going to achieve joint responsibility? Frankly, you know, if somebody's making a unilateral decision, you think they're going to give up that ability to make that unilateral decision easily, and then make other people bring them in and listen to their feedback? That's really hard to convince people to do that. And we really wanted cross-functional, self-organized teams, because if you think the product managers were underfunded and the docs folks were underfunded, well, the Agile people, there were all of 2 of us in the very beginning. And so we were really underfunded, and there was no way we were going to be able to shepherd the number of teams that 1,500 people would represent. It's just not possible. And ultimately, we essentially learned, and I would hope that everybody knows this, that Agile simply doesn't work, at least for Red Hat, unless we customize it to our organization and structure and needs. Otherwise, it's just something that somebody's put on top of the teams that they just categorically will not accept. Chapter 2. We're getting faster now. We're not so much a sloth anymore, maybe not so much a turtle, but maybe between a turtle and a hare. We're somewhere in the middle. And there's a happy ending. So I don't want to make you feel like this is a story of gloom and doom. We actually did have a happy ending in May of this year when we released our new operating system, RHEL 8. As you can see, lovely graphics and all this wonderful stuff. We had a huge party at our annual conference with wonderful confetti. They found money to buy RHEL balloons. I love that. I'm telling you, like, I saw the RHEL balloons and I wanted to take them home, but I couldn't bring them on the plane. That would have been not a good thing. So let's talk a little bit about where we went to actually get to the milestone in May. We focused on 3 things, the first one being empathy between roles. So we really wanted people to essentially stop putting down the other roles in the room. And so it wouldn't be engineering versus quality engineering, or quality engineering versus product management, or product management versus program management. We wanted everybody to have deep respect for the work that others were doing. And we knew that the way to get that was just simply by writing down what each person was going to do. Because oftentimes what I learned was just simply somebody would say, well, I think that person over there should be doing that thing. And then you would go over to that person and say, should you be doing this thing? And they're like, that's not my job. That's this person's job over here. And you'd run over and you'd say, hey, is that your job? And they'd say, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And so by simply writing it down, we actually identified where we had huge gaps. And then surprise when folks said, is that my job? I didn't know that. And so just simply writing things down helped folks actually understand who held the ball at any given moment. We also knew that we're always going to need waterfall and Agile in our process workflow. We are an operating system, and as you might imagine, our operating systems light up hardware. And so all of you who have laptops in this room, chipsets inside those laptops, we actually light those up, right? Maybe not all of them, but a large number of them. And so if you are dealing with applications, it's 100% a software workflow. There's no hardware vendor over there. Maybe there are some hardware vendors who care. But for the most part, those hardware vendors don't care if Python's running or not. But if you turn and you go to like an Intel and you say, we are not going to make your date for putting the new version of Linux on your chipset, sorry, they might actually have a problem with that. And so their distribution schedule and the schedule that they have to align to isn't flexible. They're making something physical. And so we know that we're always going to have a waterfall mentality as well as an Agile mentality in our system. And then finally, we absolutely had to update our outmoded tools. We could no longer run our business using a tool that was not fit for purpose. So where did we begin? Hint, it's a 3-step process. I'm telling you right now, these are 3 steps that you should write down. It is the silver bullet of Agile, I promise, and you will find out why. So the first one is just simply pressing start. okay? Just start. This concept of good enough for now is the most important concept to teach your teams. If you are constantly saying, try until it's perfect before you start, you will never learn what perfect actually means. You only have a concept in your brain of that. Now, this is what pressing start actually did for us. So my colleague Brendan and I are ready to race, and we're like, on your marks, get set, and the rest of the team said, yeah, we're not going to do that. Sorry, we're just going to say no to you. And so let's ponder this together. Why would a team of 1,500 people say no to us? Anybody got any ideas? Well, how do you change the process of 1,500 people? Just press start? Anybody got it incrementally? Any other ideas? Let me add some context. They've been doing this for 20 years, okay? That's why they said no. I've got this process over here. I've got my scripts. I've got all my things. I know how to do my job. I don't need you, agile person, who's going to come and change my world. And FYI, 20 years ago was before the Agile Manifesto, so their development process started in 1998, which, if I do my math properly, was 3 years before Agile was even a thing. And so their development process predates Agile. And so, of course, it must be better, right? Yeah, because it's older. And so it definitely has more something to it. Well, here's really what we did. And I'm not lying. We started with a tool. So how many people are horrified by that? Because I was telling my husband that last night, and he was like, oh, I had so much respect for you, and now I don't. I'm not joking. He literally kind of flinched a little when I showed him the slide. He couldn't believe it. Jira, to be specific, I saw my Red Hatters' hands go up in the back of the room. I'm going to get emails from them shortly as well. Like, how can you do that, Jen? Well, there's a really good reason, and I'm going to explain that reason a little bit later. So hold on to that horror. And now I got your attention. Hold on to the horror. All right? The second thing is we knew we had to up-level our organizational abilities. So those of you who are D&D fans in the room, Matt Takane, you will see the dies in the back there. And so we had to create character sheets and to decide that stamina was a character attribute that we wanted to invest in our organization. And so for organizational abilities, frankly, our division knew, as you might imagine, engineering driven. So we spent a heck of a lot of time talking about how we were going to do things. And some of those conversations, I will tell you, no lie, I think I might have drooled a little bit. My eyes would glaze over and I would say, holy cow, I have no idea what this person is saying, but I'm going to look like I'm interested. Tell me more. And so we really had to teach people to stop focusing on how we were going to build things, because we'll figure it out. Like that part of what we do, it's hard and it's messy, but gosh darn it, we have 1,100 amazing engineers. At some point, we will figure out how to solve the problem. It's not the focus. The focus is, are the things we are building the right things? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What do our customers need? How are we going to make this product better for our users? Not how are we doing it, but rather what are we doing? We had to have a heart-to-heart about the word ownership versus leadership. And so, as you might imagine, we had many engineers who went into the career of management to make technical decisions for broad teams. And we had to change that behavior from one of bottleneck decision-making to decentralized decision-making, because we could no longer allow those folks to own the technology because we couldn't move fast enough behind those bottlenecks. And then we also had to teach consent versus consensus. Does anybody know what consensus decision-making means versus consent? So consensus means everybody in this room has to say yes to something. Consent means, Matt, you're an Agile coach. I trust you to make the right decision from an Agile perspective. Just let me know what happens. And then I send Matt to a meeting and he does his job and he comes back and lets me know what happens. That's what consent means. And so we had to teach this organization that it was okay to not be in every single meeting and part of every single decision. And anecdotally, that first face-to-face meeting in which my boss, Denise Dumas, said to me, there is no way you can put 200 people in a meeting and have it go well here in this division. And I just said, hold my beer, I gotcha. We'll make this work. And she said, I don't think you're gonna do it. And I did it. And so what it looked like was 190 people in a room, all shouting at each other and all wanting their spot in the spotlight. And so just know that's not what we do today, but it was the Wild West 4 years ago. And then finally, we had to teach the department to evolve. So we were playing checkers. And sometimes we would get an extra checker on top of us and we'd be able to move backwards. But for the most part, we could only move forwards and diagonal. And we really needed to teach people how to play chess because we needed folks to be able to move in all different directions and think differently about how they were doing work. And that evolution really looked like, so that technology problem that we had, the operating system versus the applications layer, we had to actually, because folks basically said that newfangled thing isn't for me, we actually had to give people opportunity to opt in versus accepting the new architecture. And that actually worked for us really well, surprise. So we still have we have some folks who are working in a very modular way and other people who choose not to, and that's completely fine. We also had to have teams own their own process. And in order for them to do that, they had to understand what all their input should look like and what all their output should look like. And then once they understood that, we just said, go for it. Just know these are the things we're going to be asking from you on these dates. Otherwise, we don't really care what you do in a private meeting. But we expect you to do these things. And then finally, we had to keep our old process from new tools. And so as you might imagine, we're back now to that tool conversation. And for all of you who are horrified about introducing a tool into the system as a method for rolling Agile out, well, let me tell you what I was more horrified about. Messing with Bugzilla, which is based in 20 years of process, automation, scripting, bots, integrated into our release system automatically, which takes thousands upon thousands of release notes and automatically moves them over to a place in which our customers can see them. And we were thinking about messing with that. How about not? How about we leave that alone? Because what we can't do is we can't suddenly find 1 million man hours to deploy a version of RHEL because we've messed the workflow up. And so because we knew that we had to change our workflow, we had to have a place to test it. And it couldn't be Bugzilla because we had to separate those streams. We couldn't risk it. So now we are cheetahs in the RHEL story. Some of us are still turtles. I've broken my leg a long time ago and I still I walk really slow. And we are now continuously improving. And so I'll remind you, these are the 3 pillars of our change. So we're going to talk about where we actually landed with those pillars and what actually happened. So the first one, empathy between roles. Everybody has a voice was our objective. There is nothing more important to me as Chief Agilist for Red Hat to make sure that everyone who comes to a meeting, regardless of their location, has a voice. And I am known for this. I am known for the one who makes sure our remote employees get a chance to speak because it's important. And we can't have the same people talking over and over and over again. It drowns out the voices of others. And quite frankly, if we have 1,500 brains, we probably should use them, right? So that's a really important thing for me. And so what we accomplished was all roles are represented on teams, and it is non-optional. And so when I talk about things, there are some things that were optional for teams to do, but the non-optional things for teams to do was you must meet and you must have at least one person from every single role represented, and you cannot make unilateral decisions. As a team, you make decisions, and there is no other way to do this. And holding folks accountable to that was a serious goal. We made them real with quarterly planning. So if I say, just go be a team, good luck. There's really no output or way to measure this or to ensure that they are actually doing the things that we're asking them to do. And so, as you might imagine, with that 3-year, 4-year, 5-year spread, planning kind of looked like for this team, well, we got 3 years to get things done, so we think maybe this. And then we work, and we're about a week out from DevCut, and we basically say, yeah, well, we said we were going to do about 15,000 bugs, so let's get rid of 14,050 of those, and we'll bring in the rest of them. And so everybody's like, well, we thought we were going to get all this stuff, but we actually didn't, right? So we wanted folks to actually learn how to plan in smaller increments and then actually, as a team, decide what they could commit to in that 3-month period of time. And that was how we lit up that all roles are represented. So is the entire team with all roles represented in agreement with what you're committing to and what you're planning on working for on the next 3 months? So that was a real thing that we did. And we also implemented facilitation norms. So that 190-person meeting, yeah, that didn't happen again. We have a document, I feel like it's 60 pages long now, that details out everything we expect people to do, like just simply don't interrupt others when they're speaking. Like, that's just not nice. And if you have something to say, can you raise your hand so I know that you're queuing for a very important thing to say? And I will tell you, there are many people that have worked with me that get mad because they queue and I give them a number like they're at the deli, and then I write their name on the board. And if somebody's saying something is truly inflammatory and they raise their hand to speak, they think that they should go after that person who is saying that inflammatory thing so they can counter it immediately. And then I put their name on the list and it's number 7. And they're like, but, and I'm like, yeah, no, sorry. And the reason I do that is pretty straightforward, and they're all going to be horrified, and I'll get that email and CC memo list. The reason why I do that is because 9 times out of 10, when someone raises their hand to react to someone else, what's going to come out of their mouth, they're going to regret. And so we want them to wait, take a deep breath, count to 30, do some yoga ohms, and then speak. I have this rule with teams that if you're going to add to the conversation, I love it. Please add as much as possible. If you're going to hold that conversation neutral, that's the +1 thing. That's the I agree with you, and then I'm going to rephrase what you just said in different order. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes it's just somebody speaking to hear themselves speak. I'm a little neutral on that. Maybe you should think about it before you raise your hand. And if you're going to say something like, your idea sucks and you suck too, yeah, then don't say it at all, right? So we have now greater representation from critical roles, but we still need to work on it. And one of the areas that we are working on very hard right now is that terrible distribution of engineers to product management. So as you might imagine, I think it's something like last time they ran the numbers, one product manager to every 70 engineers, or some crazy spread. Because we know that is not sustainable for our product managers, and we actually want them to do product manager-like jobs, we are rolling out a product ownership initiative inside of engineering that will help build that competency so that product managers do not have to sit in engineering meetings and answer low-level conversation or questions when they could be out at our customers and getting more information. We're also working on better reporting via Jira Portfolio. We made a huge misstep when we rolled it out first. We should have bought Portfolio at the same time that we rolled it out, just flat out frank and honest. We didn't. We waited a year, and that was a mistake. And so now we are teaching people how to actually get better at seeing cross-team dependencies, because we never were able to see it in Bugzilla. Think about that. You didn't know. Like, you had no idea. There was no way to see that. You could create a tracker that would list the bugs that you needed, but gosh, if you forgot something or you didn't see something, there was no way to know. Waterfall versus Agile. So all frameworks are made equal in RHEL, and this is a very serious thing for us. We will not consider it any other way, and that might horrify some people in the room. Like, why would you ever give Waterfall a voice? Well, I already told you why. And the reason also, too, is because I don't want to disenfranchise people who actually have it working for them. Why would I ever do that? And honestly, it really actually is working in some parts of RHEL. There's not a whole lot that goes wrong in certain parts of this waterfall workflow. So understand, it's not always evil. It actually does have benefit when applied correctly. So what did we accomplish? We have an updated program cycle. So it's no longer 24 months. It is much more condensed. The other thing that we changed, which is really important to know, is we've reimagined how people think of waterfall. Before, our programs, and they're still structured this way, they're like the RHEL 7 program, the RHEL 8 program. We'd still structure by version number, but via the implementation of quarterly planning, instead of saying to teams, plan for RHEL 7, and then figure out what you're going to do, and then plan for RHEL 8, and then figure out what you're doing, and then you can imagine those things are competing with the same people for the same priorities, and is RHEL 7 more important than RHEL 8 because we have to do both of them? Instead of having that type of conversation, essentially what we're asking people to do is just plan by time. And so 3 months of time, what can you do? Is there a milestone for one of those releases in that? Then fine. Just say what you're going to do and then tag those things appropriately for each stream. So that is a reimagination of our waterfall. What we're still working on is we still have to work on it. We still have to integrate meetings. We still have to get rid of things that are forcing people to think version only. And we're almost there. We are so close. We're like waiting for that final step. We're still working on quarterly planning. It's really hard. For the 2 teams that started first, they just graduated. It took them 2 years. 2 years to get it down. And they're probably not done. They probably still have stuff to work on. But they're now at the point where they feel confident enough to do it without help from our teams. And then finally, consistently meeting deadlines. So if we're now in this new age where we're going to deploy on a regular basis, and all the dates must be the dates that we agree, and we are being very public about the fact that we will no longer have this loosey-goosey, how long between releases? We actually have a cadence now, a heartbeat. And there's a reason for that heartbeat, because we are an operating system. Thousands upon thousands of customers, companies, partners, our own products rely on us to put the right thing out for them to build on top of. And if we have a chaotic schedule, they will never be successful. They will never know when they can inject their requirements into our system, and they will never know when they can actually get the things that they need. And quite frankly, typically what winds up happening is we get our layered products, which are much more agile, much more fast, because they can be. At the day that DevCod is due, say, well, we needed this code. Can you get that in for us? And we have to say things like, yeah, I don't think that's actually going to happen. And without knowing when that next release was going to come, you can imagine that was an escalation, right? You got to do it. You got to slip the date to get that in. But now we can say things like, you can't get it in for this release, but just wait for the next one. It's coming in 3 months, 6 months, or 3 years, depending on what the type of enhancement is. And then finally, updating our outmoded tools. So all tools are fit for purpose. So we're not getting rid of Bugzilla. In case anybody has already started that flame war, I am not getting rid of Bugzilla, okay? Just not. It's an open source tool. It is fit for purpose. It's good for bugs. That's why it works. It's good for low-level work. But all level work in development in Bugzilla was never linked to the high-level market requirements that our product management team was trying to solve. And so when you have a high-level market problem, like, say, for example, make rel easy to install, and you have about 50,000 bugs underneath that are not linked to that market problem, how do you know what's going on in a release that might be tied to that? Well, frankly, you don't know. We also raised the profile of our non-development work, and I actually have an example of why this is important. And so if you are unable to link your low-level development work to your high-level market problems, then somebody's going to show up at DevCut with a big barrel of code and say, whoosh, here you go, marketing, do what you can with it. And the marketing team is going to go, well, I think this looks interesting, and this over here looks interesting, and maybe that thing over there, I think we can kind of spaghetti this together into a story. That's a terrible way to build a message for a product. Wouldn't it be better if you had a team that knew what your features were and could put all of the creative content people in a room and develop something that looks like that? Now, it might seem rather, I don't know, inconspicuous. It might not seem really imaginative and creative for the folks in the room. But the most important part was they gave us confetti cannons. And I'll be honest with you, when I got that confetti cannon in my hand, I was like, I love the product marketing team. They're great. That's me and Mike McGrath behind the stage. We unfortunately gave a T-shirt cannon to some product managers. I will not name any names. That was a mistake. They definitely should have gone to me. Also, you can't really see it in this picture, so I will embiggenify it for you. They gave us tiny little fedoras covered in glitter. And I was banned by my husband from ever having a product that had loose glitter on it. And I got something. So this is not, I could actually bring that home. And all of my clothing and my bag was covered in glitter when I came home. It almost caused divorce, let's just be honest. And then also this. So this is the floor of Summit with the gigantic 8 on the carpet. This was gigantic. It's about the size of this room, right? So to see this, was to see the true power of our marketing department and their creativity and how they could integrate this together. And more importantly, we had a dog at Summit with Summit swag on, with Rel 8 swag on. His name is Oakley, and he's our Rel PMM mascot. And we love Oakley. So yeah, so these are the types of things that marketing people can do. They can be creative and fun and playful and excite our customers and frankly excite us to want to do more and better and all these wonderful things. And so what we're working on is making better use of planning tools. And so as I mentioned, we just got Rel Portfolio, so we need to do a better job. And we also need process automation. And so we do bring in data from Bugzilla into Jira. And of course, as you might imagine, for all of you techies in the room, having a tool that brings data from one system to another doesn't always work the way you expect it to all the time. And so it doesn't always work the way we expect it to all the time. So we're working on making it better for our teams. So in closing, what I want to say is that this team is unlike any other team I have ever worked with. I will be honest with you all. I have never had the pleasure, and I went into this thinking, oh God, 1,500 people. My first interaction with my boss was I came into her division, and she brought me into her room or into her office, and she sat me down and she said, Jen, you can do whatever you want with the application layer teams. But if you look at my kernel engineers, you talk to my kernel engineers, you say anything to my kernel engineers, you're done. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a strong message. Now, she's probably in her office right now going, I never said that. But that's how I took what she said to me. I took it seriously. And I thought, there's no way that I'm ever going to get across to any of those people over there. There's no way that we'll ever be able to address the change that is needed on that side of the fence. And I'll be honest with you, the rest of the company also thinks the same way. Like, they're like, oh, those people are so slow. I don't know, you know. But I'll be honest with you all, they're the most friendly, kind, caring, actually interested in changing themselves group of people that I have ever met. And I really mean that. I'm not just saying that. I'm saying deeply, truly from the bottom of my heart, they might play really hard and they may get in your face and yell at you because they're passionate about what they believe in. But at the end of the day, they want to do what's right. And that is what sets this team aside from my normal Agile teams that I've worked with in the past. They want to do what's right for RHEL. They want to do what's right for Red Hat. And ultimately, even if we don't run daily stand-ups, and even if we don't get rid of waterfall, and even if we don't have meetings where 190 people have to be present, we will continuously improve. That is our mindset. We are always digging in and trying to find that next thing that will make things better. We're always trying to set the next stretch goal for the division. We're always trying to see how we can get rid of the stuff that doesn't have to happen. And after all, isn't that practically Agile? Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Sure. A separate compilation of all the quotes in the presentation. I believe the presentation will be available online, so you'll be able to pull them out. Sorry, got there before the mic. Any other questions?
So you talked about the two teams that took about 2 years to actually have them release features on like a quarterly basis. How do you plan on scaling that to the whole company? That seems to be like a hard problem.
Yeah.
And do you expect it to get faster, or do you have like a plan for that?
Let's just be clear. It did take them 2 years to have their first successful quarterly planning. What the 2-year increment was their first quarterly planning. They did the best that they could. And then the next one they did a little better, and the next one they did a little better. That 2 years was really, so I like to joke that we kind of manipulated the teams a little bit by saying, we'll help you with quarterly planning if you'll accept this Agile practitioner into your team. And so as the Agile practitioners work with the team, they would say things like, hey, I think this meeting isn't really going so well. How about we try this facilitation technique that I know? Or, hey, this data over here in these 3 systems should probably be in one system. Can I help you merge it into one? And so there was a lot of other things going on during that 2-year period of time that they were working on. It wasn't just simply learning quarterly planning. So there might have been a little bit of a bait and switch. And much to the horror of people listening right now, they probably go, oh, I'm firing my Agile practitioner now. But how do you roll this out for an entire company? Honestly, you just start. That's the only thing you can do, is just start. If you wait, if I were to say wait until there's somebody who can help you, that's not going to be a successful look. So the best thing you can do is just say, I'm trying to get better. I will plan for a 3-month increment of time. I will commit to this work, and then in 3 months, I will just look at what I actually was able to do and learn from the data that I am getting back out of the system. That's really all I can hope for teams to do. I am between you all and beer. Anna. There's a question over here.
How did this change you? You talked about how you take you.
Yeah.
How did this change you along the journey?
Yeah. How did this change me? I was much younger 4 years ago. I am a truly stressed individual. The change that I think has happened for me has really been that I realize that I take things very seriously and to heart. And so when somebody isn't doing well, I think that's I should help or do something or try to or stretch myself even further. And I often joke that my phone is constantly buzzing when something bad happens because people come to me and say, I need your help, I need your support, I need your assistance. And as you might imagine, the emotional burden of that is extreme, to have not just the 1,500 people in RHEL, but also OpenShift and Rev and OpenStack and folks in Ansible, all seeing me as the person who can help them. And that incoming emotional energy has been overwhelming. And so what I have learned over the past 4 years is I have to compartmentalize like crazy. And so work has got to stay home. One of the biggest transformational things I have done is just simply, I say work has got to stay home. Sorry, I work, sorry, I see Natty laughing at me back there. Work has got to stay home because I work from home, but I'm thinking about my office. When I shut that door at night, I need to leave it behind that door. I have taken all work off my phone. I no longer look at it outside of work hours. I try not to. I say if there's something really important, text me, which is probably a mistake that I'm now learning through failure. But in all honesty, those are the big changes I've had to make. I've had to really say to myself, I desire a life outside of work, and I need to dedicate time to that. Nothing is truer now in my career. If I didn't do that, I would burn out. I would flame out and die. So I have to focus on me and myself and the things that make me happy. That is what I've learned. Anything else? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.